gods on high, what brings you here to mystify?
Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Today, thanks to a gracious invitation by Stu Weldon, we are here with you live at the beautiful Indian Head Resort in Lincoln, New Hampshire to celebrate the 51st anniversary of the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience at the memorial site of this historic event. It is my very great honor and privilege to introduce our guests today. They are the co-authors of the book, Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. They are Kathleen Marden, who has just received MUFON's Ufologist of the Year award, to add to her many accomplishments and honors in this field, and who is also the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. And Stanton Friedman, the man who truly, as they say, needs no introduction. Although best known for bringing the story behind Roswell to light, he has authored many other books, among them Crash at Corona and Top Secret Magic, and has co-authored another book with Kathy Marden, Science Was Wrong. What so impresses me and all other ufologists is the fastidious and intense research both of these world-class investigators have brought to the field. So, welcome to the show, Stan and Kathleen. Great to talk to you again.
Great to be with you.
Glad to be back.
Oh, that's cool. And Kathleen, as I mentioned to you before the show, some people still are not truly familiar with what happened to Betty and Barney Hill. And your book has such a succinct description of it that I was hoping you would just read it to us from your book, Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
As they motored around a slight curve near Indian Head, a natural granite rock formation resembling a Native American profile just south of the narrow valley through Franconia Notch, they entered a wide expanse. Almost directly in their path, the couple encountered the flattened circular disc, hovering silently an estimated 80 to 100 feet above their vehicle. Barney rapidly brought the car to a halt in the middle of the road and grabbed his binoculars for a closer look, opening the car door for a less encumbered view. Quickly, in an arching movement, it shifted from its location directly ahead and rested above the treetops in an adjacent field. Barney pocketed Betty's handgun and walked toward it. The silent, enigmatic craft was huge, maybe 60 to 80 feet in diameter, with a double row of rectangular windows extending across its rim. As he approached it, two red lights at the end of fin-like structures parted from the sides of the craft, and it tilted toward Barney. Lifting his binoculars to his eyes, he spied a group of humanoid figures moving about with the precision of German officers. As the craft tilted downward and began to descend toward him, one of the strange creatures that remained at the window communicated a frightening message. Barney had the immediate impression that he was in danger of being plucked from the field. Overcome with fear, and with all the courage that he could muster, he tore the binoculars from his face and raced back to the car. Breathless, trembling, and in near hysterics, he told Betty that they needed to get out of there or they were going to be captured.
Captured, that's the title of your book. That was great. Who were they, your aunt and uncle, if you could tell us a little about them? Because that's a terrifying experience for anybody. Who were they? How did it affect them? I mean, a lot of people just hear the story. They don't know the people behind it. And who
Betty and Barney were just average, down-to-earth people.
Yeah.
Betty was a social worker for the state of New Hampshire. Barney worked for the post office. They were also very actively involved in the civil rights movement. Barney was legal redress to the local NAACP. He also served on the regional board. Betty was also involved with the NAACP. They helped to set up the Rockingham County Community Action Program through the Office of Economic Opportunities. And Barney served as the chairman of the first board of directors. In 1965, Barney was appointed by the governor of the state of New Hampshire to serve on the state's advisory committee to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. So they were very, very dedicated citizens of the state of New Hampshire doing good things for other people. Actively involved in Lyndon Johnson's campaign. They were active attempting to promote reading or a literacy program in the state of New Hampshire for voters' rights. So they did a number of very good things. They were also great family members. They had a lot of friends. They were active in their church. Just well-rounded, normal people.
And no prior interest in UFOs especially. I think Betty had some interest, but nothing where she would read books and really get involved with investigating them.
That's correct. Her only interest came from a report that my mother made to her in 1957 that she had observed a strange light in the sky. Yeah. Betty and Barney had never read a book about UFOs. They had no prior interest in the topic.
So as I was speaking to you before the show, too, I mean, they got home. It was late at night. They went right to sleep. And when they woke up in the morning, I mean, they must have had such a reaction to this. I know myself, it would be so unbelievable to me. I would have to say, did this actually happen? Were we, like, dreaming? Or it was so bizarre. And then they started to look for evidence.
Well, they arrived home at 5 o'clock in the morning. They had anticipated arriving home at 2 or 3, so that they were immediately aware that they were later than they had anticipated. There was also physical evidence that something was wrong, and they had no prosaic explanation for this evidence. First of all, the craft was so close to them. It hovered only 100 feet above their vehicle. They worried that they might have been exposed to radiation. Right. So they were wondering what the impact would be on their bodies. Betty, when she took her dress off that morning before she went to bed, discovered that there was a 2-inch tear at the top of the zipper and a 1-inch tear in the thick zipper fabric. Also, the dress was torn from waist to hemline, and the hem was torn down on one side. It was in fine condition when she put it on the previous morning. She had no prosaic explanation for how that could have occurred. The tops of Barney's best dress shoes were scraped. He was a meticulous dresser. He had no prosaic explanation for how that could have happened. They were not simply scuffed. They were scraped. He had to buy new shoes and relegate those to yard work. The binocular strap was cleanly severed when he pulled it down from his eyes in that field. He pulled it with such force. It was a leather binocular strap. Their watches had stopped running and never ran again. And when Betty called my mother and told her about all of this, my mother said she would call a neighbor of ours who was a physicist. She called, and I'll never know why he gave this advice, but he said, if you have a compass, take the compass out to the car to see how the needle would react. So she did. And she started down near the trunk of the car, the back wheel, and she moved the compass up. And that is when she discovered that there were a number, maybe 12 to 18 concentric circles on the trunk of the car that hadn't been there the day before. They were highly polished. It was almost as if somebody laid a template down and sprayed it with lacquer. And when she held the compass over those spots, the needle would spin and spin. But when she moved it away, the needle would drop down. Barney also experimented with this, with the same results. I saw those spots, probably 2 days after their abduction occurred, when my family and I went down. And that is when I saw some of the physical evidence. I heard their story again, not just what my mother had repeated to me, and we saw those spots on the trunk of the car.
We should note something here, that they didn't have any concept of what all had happened during that missing time. They were aware that there was a gap, but they didn't remember anything except Barney seeing what he saw through the binoculars, the window.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't remember being on board any craft, being abducted, or anything like that. They remember seeing a saucer that the sighting lasted for quite some time as they drove down.
And it was close up.
It was close up. It wasn't just a light in the sky. And some of the silly explanations. And they never wanted to go public with this story either, I should stress. People say, oh, they were just looking for attention.
And this was a conscious recollection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they remembered Barney seeing through the windows and these other physical effects, but they knew nothing at all about the abduction. So this was a mystery event. And it was only because of subsequent health problems, Barney's ulcer acting up. And his doctor, for the ulcer, saying, Barney, I can't do anything more for you. There must be something else here. And he's the one who suggested seeing a psychiatrist.
Okay.
Because remember, back then, ulcers were thought to be related to psychological differences.
Yeah, I was going to say what the connection would
bacteria. You see, now we know they're caused by stomach bacteria. It's a whole complicated thing. So it was that doctor who sent him to Dr. Benjamin Simon.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's one outstanding character in this investigation, it's Dr. Simon. Not because he knew anything about flying saucers, because he didn't, but because he was a truly world-class expert at having people who'd had traumatic experiences, what today we would call PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Simon was the man to see. He ran a hospital, had 3,000 beds for such people in World War II. That's an expert. The Army made a movie, Let There Be Light.
Yeah.
He was the one shown in the movie explaining how he got these poor shell-shock war veterans were the term that was used back then. So his contribution here was to have the real capability of sorting out what had happened during a missing time experience.
Absolutely, and through a real... We're going to have to take a quick break. Kate Valentine here. I'm speaking with Kathleen Marden and Stanton Friedman. They are the co-authors of Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. We're on 1160 WVNJ, and we're broadcasting to you live from the lovely Indian Head Resort in Lincoln, New Hampshire. That is the memorial site of this historical event. If you'd like to join us in this conversation, please post your thoughts and comments and questions on our website at AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. We'll be right back after a short break. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Kate Valentine here, speaking with Kathleen Marden and Stanton Friedman. They are the co-authors of Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. We're broadcasting live here at the memorial site of this very historical event in Lincoln, New Hampshire at the beautiful Indian Head Resort. Two quick announcements here. The winner of last week's contest is Dale Lewis, and a copy of Air by William Bryant Logan is on your way. More importantly, though, there's still time to join us here up in New Hampshire to take a tour and recreate the Hills experience right here in beautiful autumn weather. So welcome back, Stan and Kathleen. And we had a question that came in, and my apologies, Stanton, I didn't realize you were also a ufologist of the year. And Kathleen, someone wanted to know what you had to do to become ufologist of the year.
I did a lot of work for MUFON, but let me give you some details. I was appointed MUFON's director of the abduction research team. And in that position, I wanted to identify any weaknesses in abduction investigations in MUFON. And so I examined all of the procedures and protocols we had in place and discovered that we had a 35-page paper in the Field Investigator's Manual, but really didn't have anything that was bulleted. We didn't have questionnaires or supporting information for field investigators. So I worked with a team in Florida at developing protocols and procedures for investigations. And it was really a lot of work, pretty much full-time, in addition to writing the new book that I'm writing. And we finally put all of this together, and it's being tested in the state of Florida right now. Cool. So I guess it was all of that work that made them decide that I should have the award.
Well deserved it was. But just before the break, you were saying, too, that you wanted to make it clear that there were other things that Betty and Barney Hill observed, the buzzing sounds, the red orb in the road, and what was that? Let's see, they were driving along and they saw the star, and then the star became a craft, and then they heard buzzing sounds of. Do I have that?
After Barney left the field, screaming to death that they were going to be captured. They had to get out of there.
Right.
That he saw the craft shift over the top of the vehicle, and he told Betty to roll down the window and look up.
Okay.
She looked up. She was expecting to see light. It was a bright, light night. There was a waxing gibbous moon in the sky. It would be full in 6 days. All she saw was blackness. There was this black sort of void there. Mm-hmm. And then she and Barney heard a series of code-like buzzing sounds that seemed to be striking the trunk of the car. Mm-hmm. They caused the car to vibrate and for this tingling sensation to pass through their bodies. The next thing they knew, they were 35 miles down the highway. They were being brought back to full consciousness by another set of these buzzing sounds. They remembered observing a fiery orb in the road. They remembered encountering a roadblock, but they didn't know where or when that occurred. That was all part of their conscious recall.
Wow. That is such a scary story. I know it sounds silly, but it is scary.
Absolutely.
And, sitting here looking out at the White Mountains and knowing what they look like at night and how lonely these roads are, I mean, it really brings it home. But you Stanton, too, you were talking about Dr. Benjamin Simon and what a respected professional man he was.
We looked up his records, John Fuller's papers. He wrote this book. It was so clear. He was president of this psychiatric group, head of that psychiatric group. Mm-hmm. Just outstanding background. And as a matter of fact, we should make it clear that there was no intention during his work on this case or at any time that this was going to be a public thing.
Right. Oh, this is very private.
They were going to lose their jobs.
Well, and this is Dr. MD confidentiality, too.
Yes, and he had trouble with the medical society because of that. The story got out because somebody broke a confidence, and the guy calls Kathy wants to get an interview. Mm-hmm. He said, absolutely not. And wanted to talk to Dr. Simon. They didn't want any part of that.
No.
The guy went ahead with the article, had a lot of favorable response. It went around the world. Mm-hmm. And then at some point you have to say, what do we do now? Yeah. The story is out, and the response was favorable. They didn't lose their jobs. They weren't ridiculed, right? But an important part of this story, there was no example for them to have copied. They couldn't be echoing other people's experience because there wasn't any experience out there. This became the standard, if you will.
Right.
Your usual UFO abduction case. But for people, they're just repeating what other people said. And it's a problem Kathy has now investigating abductions. This really happened to this person, or is it something they heard about somebody else? Mm-hmm. Well, in this case, there was no question like that because there wasn't any other place. And so we're very fortunate in that the model case involves such respectable people. Mm-hmm. And, talk a little bit maybe about the star map in a bit. There were other things about the case that made it unique, besides Dr. Simon. And, I was impressed with the case early on because I was very fortunate. I had a chance in Pittsburgh where I was working for Westinghouse. You get a call from a television station on which I had appeared, and their radio station also, talking about UFOs. They thought I'd like to know that Betty and Barney were coming to town.
Really?
And they told me where they were staying. they trusted me.
Yeah, well, sure.
They knew I wasn't
because
gonna
you were
be
also a public
that kind of
figure,
thing.
right.
So I called and arranged to have dinner with them.
Ah.
So I had the chance to meet them. We had dinner, we talked, and I was very favorably impressed because I read the book and the Look magazine articles. I didn't see the celebrity kind of thing, we'll make a big story about this and so forth. I was very favorably impressed with the two of them. So that not long after that, I got a call from the head of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, Carl Lorenzen. APRO was one of the two big groups back then. There was a woman looking at the star map in the Betty and Barney Hill case, and she was looking for a scientist to talk to about maybe helping her out in some kind of way. And was I interested in doing that? And I said, sure. So I called Marjorie Fish, who was this woman who had visited Betty, to talk about the star map. And she was building three-dimensional models, incredible activity, of our local galactic neighborhood. Anyway, she built a total of 26 of these models. This is something Betty had seen related under hypnosis. And Dr. Simon, bless him, asked her if she could remember what it looked like. It was a crazy conversation. She asked the alien where he's from, and he shows her a map, three-dimensional model, I should say, with a bunch of points of light that are supposedly stars. And she asks him, well, where are you on the map? Wise guy says, do you know where you are? No, I don't know anything about astronomy. Well, how can I tell you where I'm from if you don't know where you're at? You know, end of discussion. Well, Dr. Simon, fortunately, asked her if she could remember it accurately. This is under hypnosis. And he gives her a post-hypnotic suggestion to draw it later on if she could remember it accurately. And she did that, and it's in the book, and you can't make any sense out of it in the book. Which star is which? We got no clue. They're obviously here, and that's...
Right.
The sun is here someplace.
Almost,
but
that's, yeah.
So Marjorie was intrigued with that, Marjorie Fish, and she visited Betty to get a little more information than was in the book. She started building these models, and she had to get... The tough thing here, we have to remember, times have changed. This is back in the 60s.
Yes.
We hadn't been to the moon yet.
Yes, exactly.
So
and
space travel was a far out kind of notion.
Right.
And we didn't have good position data on the stars.
Right.
The point of building a three-dimensional model is to look at it from all different directions and see if there's a three-dimensional pattern that matched the two-dimensional one that Betty had drawn.
Correct.
And so she was getting nowhere. Couldn't find a match. And she was gradually getting rid of stars. Her biggest model had 256 stars in it. And she had a cat that occasionally touched the strings, which fouled up the model.
And this was pre-really decent computers, too, and Googling and all that.
She didn't do anything on the computer.
Star maps. And
this astronomical community was so strange that they insisted, Ohio State University, they wouldn't let her take out the catalogs of star positions.
Really?
She had to hand copy all the numbers.
Oh.
You know, because you can designate the position of a star with a couple of numbers, elevation and angle and all this stuff. So it was hard work. And she finally, after reading the stuff by the guys who say, well, this kind of star should have planets and this kind shouldn't, kind of thing. And pretty soon she was eliminating stars, and finally she found one pattern that matched angle for angle, line length for line length, what Betty had drawn. It was a great moment. And I was the first to publish about her work. And Astronomy Magazine carried an article about it after Saga Magazine. And boy, was there complaints from every direction.
I read that article. It was phenomenal because I used to get Astronomy Magazine. I think it was 73 or 4 or somewhere
Terry
through there.
In the early 70s. I went to him because I had met him, and I had written the article in Saga Magazine and suggested he do an article, so he talked to a bunch of astronomers. He got help from some people for publishing the article, as a matter of fact.
He did.
But what I'm saying is that map is special. And sure, since then we've made zillions of measurements of the positions of the stars. But the European Space Agency, Hipparcos satellite, made millions of measurements, just like Kepler is doing now.
Right.
Going out, except Hipparcos could look everywhere. Kepler was only looking at a narrow place in the universe. The important focus of all of this is it tells us the base stars, Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli, constellation of Reticulum, which means the net. Southern sky constellation, so I can't say go outside and look over there. It's not there. And those two stars just happen to be, and not known before Marjorie's were, the closest to each other pair of sun-like stars.
Okay, well, see, that alone, all these facts that just never get out in the general press. I hope a lot of people are listening and understand that. Kate Valentine here. I'm speaking with Kathleen Marden and Stanton Friedman. They are the co-authors of Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. We are in 1160 WVNJ. We're broadcasting to you live from a very beautiful Indian Head Resort in Lincoln, New Hampshire. That is the memorial site of this historical event. If you'd like to join, please post your thoughts, your comments, your questions on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. We'll be right back after a short. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show, 1160 WVNJ. Kate Valentine here, speaking with Kathleen Marden and Stanton Friedman, the co-authors of Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. We're broadcasting to you live from Lincoln, New Hampshire at the beautiful Indian Head Resort. You can still join us this weekend. There's a tour going on, I believe, Kathleen. You'll be running that, and it'll retrace the whole route of this abduction.
Dan and I will be doing it together this year.
too. Okay, cool. Oh, yeah, that's really not to miss. Come on up here. It's gorgeous, and it's going to be a phenomenal tour. But anyway, getting back to the questions that came in, we had some sort of interesting ones. Let me just go back real quick here. Robert asked, is it true that the description of the aliens that Betty and Barney encountered is a little different than your regular gray aliens? That's sort of an interesting question, because I think that's, as you said, Stanton, this was, they sort of set the scene for this. There was no prior abduction where they could have this iconic little gray. They didn't have that, so they described them a little differently.
Well, let me say that Betty and Barney described two groups. One group that was about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, one group that was about 4.5 to 5 feet tall. Their skin was gray. They were hairless. They did not have external ears. Their noses were almost flat, slightly upturned nostrils. Their mouths were simply a slit, just like today. The only difference was that they described eyes that were not black as we think of them today. They described sort of an amber-colored eye. But they did say that the pupil seemed to fill up most of the eye. So it was primarily black with a little yellow around the edges. Now, that is not what the artist depicted. So the artist's rendition was a little different than what Betty and Barney described. Betty and Barney also described beings that had a barrel-shaped chest. And sometimes we see that description today, or sometimes we think of beings as being extremely thin. They also said that the arms and legs were very spindly, just like the beings that we see artistic renditions of today. So it was very close.
Yeah, and this, I think, will be very interesting, too. It's Dana said that she read and really enjoyed your book, Captured, and she was wondering if there was any new information that came to light since it was last published.
Well, thank you, Dana.
Perfect question, Dana.
Yes, I am doing ongoing research into this case, and I have discovered some information that I wasn't aware of when I did write the book. And one of those pieces of information came from Betty's files, and just some files that I hadn't had a chance to read when I was writing the book. And they were accounts by individuals who were with Betty when Betty observed UFOs close up. And in one of those accounts, Betty's upstairs neighbor, and Betty owned an apartment building, her upstairs tenant was driving through East Kingston, New Hampshire, and this was the area that we can think of as Betty's UFO observation area. Mm-hmm. They're driving at night, and a craft comes down very, very close to the car and travels parallel to the car, projects a beam of light into the car. The neighbor stated that she would never ride with Betty again. I suspect that there might have been another abduction that took place there.
Oh, wow.
So I have a number of reports like this of people who, too, were credible individuals who had these close encounters with Betty.
Yeah. And, just to quickly get back to Dr. Simon, the thing was that he never believed that there was an abduction by aliens.
Prior to this, certainly not. And even after, he would rather choose to believe that there wasn't. The experience was real, and it's very important to note that he said, this is a guy who's treated thousands of war veterans.
Right.
Your buddy's head gets blown off next to you. That kind of
nasty stuff.
He said the emotional intensity when they relived their experience under hypnosis, this wasn't just one session, this was months of separate sessions for the two of them, was as great as it was for any of the war veterans that he had treated. Now, coming from him, with this background of treating thousands of these people, is a very important statement. It's very hard to say this couldn't be real when he had to stop one session each because he was afraid they couldn't handle it, pulse rate, all the terrible fear going on. These were terrifying experiences. And if you listen to the tape...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've heard them. You could hear a pin drop in the audience when those tapes play.
Yeah.
That's not faked.
No, that's the point. The people who have heard those are certainly aware. And Dr. Simon was sensitive, certainly, to people lying or so forth. And he certainly knew that they weren't lying. He didn't have an explanation for it. He did talk to a military friend who said that there weren't any UFOs. That's a common approach to things. But so the case is remarkable on several different levels. And thanks to Kathy for preserving Betty's files, she has the correspondence and the tapes. They're at the University of New Hampshire to be studied by scholars now.
Are they?
Yes, they are. They're in an archival collection.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
It's one of the things, it's just like this sign that's outside the motel here. That was only put up by the state after they grilled Kathy up, down, backwards.
Did they work?
Yes. Really? I actually wrote a sample text for the state, and they tweaked it a little bit. But I had to provide footnotes on every single line that I wrote. And in all, I believe I had 26 footnotes backing up the fact that the information that I was giving was accurate.
Wow. They're referring to a memorial plaque that's right outside the resort here.
Yes.
Yeah.
They did one, too. The state did, right on a highway. But what I'm saying is they didn't do this lightly. They don't. No state puts up those things lightly. They want to verify that they're telling the truth. They have a responsibility.
Well, and again, I think it reflects on the Hill's character, and we had a question that came in to that effect. It said, was this happening during the fight for civil rights? Was there disbelief or people writing them off for the sole reason that they were an interracial or biracial couple? I don't think that really had any... Did it have any... like when they were... At the time that it was happening for Look and Magazine, and they were being interviewed, did that play a part in it, do you think?
Those who knew Betty and Barney and knew their character didn't make those types of statements. But a ufologist here and there speculated that perhaps the reason that Betty and Barney were taken was because they were an interracial couple. And I think I did read maybe a debunker or two stating, well, they must have wanted attention because they were an interracial couple. I can't imagine why anyone would want to draw attention to themselves in the 60s, but Some people will grasp at straws looking for any kind of explanation.
That's one of the things that this case epitomizes, the feebleness of the anti-UFO arguments put out by the debunkers, the nasty, noisy naysayers, as I call them. They have, this all came because they watched a television show, a particular television show that was on. And Betty was a UFO fan and read all the books and all kinds, not supported by anything.
And that wasn't at all the case.
Well, there's a basic rule, anything but alien. If explanation 1 doesn't work, try explanation 2. If that doesn't work, try 3, because we know these things can't be visiting.
Well, it was interesting, too. Like you were saying, maybe they were taken up because they were a biracial couple. Well, I don't know that was the case, because I don't know if they could even have noticed that before they were abducted. But you gave some funny incidents that happened on the craft, like Barney had dentures, and they couldn't believe why his teeth came out and hers didn't. And that seemed to puzzle them. Time for another break. We will get back to these things that puzzle the aliens in a short time. Kathleen Marden and Stanton Friedman, they are the co-authors of Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. We're talking about the experience on the face of it. There is so many more details and pictures and everything. If you really want to look into it, you need to get the book. We'll be right back after a short break. We'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. Post them on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. Right back. Welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Kate Valentine here. I'm speaking with Kathleen Marden and Stanton Friedman. They are the co-authors of Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. If you have questions or comments or anything at all, please post it right now on our website at AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. So to get back to all this, what do you think is going to come out of this? Anything at all? As you said, Stanton, this is like probably what any ufologist would wish for, actual proof. And I think even the Air Force Base, if I recall, had some radar backups on that too of objects in the sky at that time. So you have radar returns, credible witnesses, actual physical evidence, and then the star map, and then the clothes, and then the compass. I don't see how it could be a more solid case for having been abducted, and not so much even abducted, but experience and interaction with other beings from
well, you see, the facts don't bother the debunkers.
I see.
There are 4 basic rules. Don't bother me with the facts. My mind is made up. If the public doesn't know, I'm not going to tell it.
Okay.
If you can't attack the data, attack the people. It's a lot easier. And do your research by proclamation rather than investigation. Well, of course, it must be that they listened to the television show, or Betty must have read a lot of books about UFOs. Stuff like that. No basis in fact.
Right.
But it sounds good. And so I am constantly looking for good arguments against the best cases and against the reality of flying saucers. I haven't been able to find any. Small percentage. Now, the debunkers make it sound as if nobody believes in flying saucers. One of the big arguments is you can't get here from there.
Oh, that's the best, right.
And it bothers the heck out of me. I worked on fission nuclear rockets as a nuclear physicist, and on fusion rockets. We did a study of those. Now, I mention those because fusion is what makes the universe work. All the stars produce their energy by nuclear fusion.
Correct.
That's what makes H-bombs work, too.
Right.
Now, it turns out that if you use the right stuff in the right way in a fusion rocket, you can kick particles out the back end that have 10 million times as much energy per particle as you can get in a dumb old chemical rocket. We're already at the point where if we wanted to spend the huge amount of money that would be required, we could get to the stars.
Right.
And what is really silly is there are people saying, well, the nearest one might be 600 light years away or 1,000 light years away. Let's look 39 light years. That's a much more achievable thing for us with our primitive background. I mean, there was no flight before 1903.
Exactly. 100 years ago, there were no roads or cars either. I mean, forget flight. I mean, the Wright brothers...
It was a neutron until 1932.
Right.
It's been there all the time.
Right. And I mean, at the time of Columbus, to cross the ocean in a few hours, I mean, it was unheard of. And
Magellan's ship took 3 years to go around the planet.
Was it really? I didn't know
3 years, in 1520.
Right.
He didn't make it. He shipped it.
Yeah.
But the space station now does it in 90 minutes.
Right, and we know so little about space-time yet. I mean, there's so much more to be investigated. And
our egos are getting in the way.
You think it just a tad? But there was a craft. It was not, in 1961, there were no known human crafts to match that description. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
And there were no known groups of people that would match that description.
That is correct.
And because they say, well, maybe, you've heard the old thing where the Nazis had the Horton wing and further developed it. And
Hitler's people could have built flying saucers. They would have. They've been used in war. They make wonderful vehicles.
Now, since we would be speaking Deutsch today, I think.
I wouldn't be speaking at all.
Yeah. But, truthfully, I mean, none of this matches up to any known thing.
No.
And so...
and we don't need
and there was a thing.
For them to be real.
Right.
We cured pernicious anemia.
Yeah.
For 20 years, feeding people liver.
Yeah.
Vitamin B12 was found much later than that.
Well, what about penicillin? The guy happened to notice some mold on a plant not growing around this,
He didn't have a full explanation for that. And the British sailors, limeys, were eating limes. They hadn't discovered vitamin C yet.
Right.
So, we're primitive. We're just beginning to reach out a little bit. Neil Armstrong just died. It wasn't that long ago. It was a tremendous achievement. I thought we'd have a base on Mars by now. I was in the space program and certainly on the moon.
Well, they say we do. I know.
Well, I know. I'd say it was a failure of leadership.
Yeah.
The nuclear Navy had Admiral Rickover. He said, that's where we're going. You don't want to go there, get off the ship. We're heading that way.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the progress we've made. I mentioned nuclear. That's my background. You realize that we not only have nuclear submarines that can go around the world underwater without coming to the surface, we have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers that can operate for 18 years without refueling.
I know.
That's impressive to me.
Well, I agree with you. I think the priorities are such that they're not concentrating on space flight at this time. But
better to kill.
Well, that's what you always say, too, right? That's why they're staying up there and they're not coming down and landing on the White House lawn because they know what's going to happen to them.
He doesn't speak for 7 billion Earthlings. You may have noticed that.
I guess. Or even yes.
Or 300 million Americans. Yes.
But has Kathleen or Stanton, Dale would like to know, either personally seen a UFO or had contact with ETs? Especially you, Kathleen, because I know you were so close to Betty, and after this experience, she continued to see them.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I wrote about that in Captured, but since it was written in the third person, you don't know that it was my experience.
Oh, I didn't know
that. I am the niece who was with Betty and Betty's sister, her mother, a family friend, and my brother had a close encounter with a UFO on Country Pond in Newton, New Hampshire.
Well,
no, I have not seen one.
Okay, that's unfair. That is unfair. But
it isn't right.
But it isn't.
To show them to me.
You really should. And tonight, too. And I want to be there to see your face when you get whooped. But Earl wrote in, and he was wondering, what you think about the field of ufology. Is it going forward in the next generation? Are they going about it correctly? How is the whole field coming along? Yeah.
That would take another hour.
I know.
I am concerned about where the next generation is coming from. I will say this. Because of Kepler and our space achievements,
yes.
Now I think most kids, most people are convinced that there is life out there. There are planets out there. We didn't used to think there were any other planets besides our own. So I think that part there's been a real benefit.
Yes.
I see ufology attracting people and attracting the Internet There's more garbage on the internet about UFOs than you can imagine. So I'm a bit worried.
Yes.
I mean, I've been active in MUFON for a long time. And I'd like to see more people join, more people get involved, more people recognize that while SETI may really stand for a silly effort to investigate, as I think it does, ufology has a lot to offer in trying to sort this all out.
Yeah.
And I hope it happens, but I'm not completely optimistic that we're going to get any better. I mean, new ideas come to be accepted, said Max Planck, not because their opponents come to believe in them, but because their opponents die and a new generation grows up that's accustomed to them.
That is true.
What seems to be happening.
And I think the tone of the field has changed a little bit, too. It's because the younger generation is so accepted the fact that there is life elsewhere, too, and it may be coming here.
I mean, when the Pope stands up and says there's no reason why God couldn't have made our brethren in outer space just as he made us, my first reaction was, who told him something?
He got it from a very high authority. Well, I guess we'll have to leave it on that note. But it's been great fun. Thank you both so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
And if you've been listening and are as intrigued as I have been with this groundbreaking abduction story, you can read the whole story and the story behind the story, as well as many details unavailable elsewhere, as well as a lot of pictures, too, in the book, Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. And please don't forget, there's still time to join us here up in Lincoln, New Hampshire at the Indian Head Resort to go on a road trip that will recreate all the events of that historical night. Congratulations again to Dale Lewis. Enjoy your copy of Air. It's a phenomenal book. And as usual, a big thank you to both Bill and Dave, whose incredible expertise has made this road show possible. A huge thank you to Stu Weldon and the Indian Head Resort for their very gracious invitation to be here this weekend. We're enjoying ourselves immensely and would highly recommend it. But as always, the biggest thank you is to you, our listeners. So tune in next week. George Filer will be back again. And until then, remember, keep your eye on the sky. Bye.
As you might expect, one of the things that characterizes the Hill case is that the debunkers make up excuses, explanations that have no meaning, no connection with reality, but that sound a little bit plausible.